You don't arrive to the crash of swords or the praise of a cheering crowd. You arrive quietly, so quietly that no one notices you at all. Tonight, you step into the life of a medieval servant, moving through the long stone halls of a great estate where silence is not peaceful but expected. You live just outside the warm circle of candlelight, close enough to feel it, never close enough to enjoy it. You rise before the sun. You work until your body aches. You sleep only when you're allowed. Heavy wool pulls on your shoulders. Cold stone seeps through your thin shoes. The air smells of soap that burns the skin, polished metal, and bread baked long ago. Take one more step inside. Stay with me. The door closes behind you with a dull, tired sound. You take your place along the wall of the great hall where servants wait and listen. The day doesn't begin with music or ceremony. It begins with a bell, faint and far away, ringing from the kitchen. But even that bell comes late for you. You were awake long before it rang. Awake before the nobles turned in their soft beds. Awake before the chapel candles were lit. Awake before the cook dragged herself toward the fire, already grumbling. For a brief moment, the world is still, not calm, just paused. That silence hangs over you like a held breath, tight and heavy, right before the weight of the day presses down. And where did you sleep? Not here in the manor. Never here. That comfort belongs to the Lord's family. Maybe a trusted maid. Maybe the steward if he stayed in favor. You sleep wherever space is left. In cold side rooms. In drafty sheds. In stone cellars that never quite warm. Sometimes, if you're unlucky, above the stables, where the smell never leaves and the floor shakes with hooves below. There is no privacy, none at all. Privacy is a luxury, saved for people who matter. Instead, you share the dark with a dozen bodies packed close together, limbs tangled, breathing each other's air on thin mattresses stuffed with straw. The blankets are rough and heavy, alive with coughs, snores, and fleas that never sleep. The air is thick sweat, old smoke, damp wood, and too many people in too little space. That smell follows you. It settles into your clothes, your skin, your hair. At first, you notice it. Later, you stop. The same goes for the stiff back, the sore hands, the quiet knowledge of where you stand in this world. It stops feeling unfair. It just feels normal. No rooster wakes you, not yet. Instead, you wake to movement. Soft footsteps on cold stone. A bucket scraping along a wall. The dull sounds of people rising before they're ready. Bodies pulling themselves from shared beds into the cold. In the corner, a small shape stirs. A boy, maybe 12, maybe younger. His name doesn't matter. It won't be used much. He is simply boy. If another comes along, he'll become older boy. Simple, efficient. He has work waiting. Important work. The first task of the day belongs to him. The fires. Overnight, the great hearths have gone dark. Stone halls sit cold and empty. Before any noble wakes, those fires must burn again. He kneels, careful and slow, breathing life into dying embers. Too much breath and the ash rises. Too little and the fire dies. Gray dust fills the air, scratching the throat, stinging the lungs. A spark snaps at his fingers. He hisses under his breath. You can almost feel the heat on your face now. But his movements remain silent, his presence almost spectral, as other servants begin to rouse around you. There's no time for a leisurely breakfast here, no idle moment for preening or reflection. The morning demands speed, an urgent efficiency that slices through any lingering fog of sleep. Rough wool tunics are quickly tugged over simple linen shifts. Boots are strapped tight with practiced, hurried movements, and hair is either tied back severely or swiftly bundled beneath a plain coif. These garments, let's be honest, are thick and brutally coarse, spun from wool, so scratchy it feels less like fabric and more like scraped tree bark against your skin. Yet they offer warmth, and warmth in these pre-dawn hours is a rare and profoundly precious luxury. The manor you inhabit, one of middling nobility, might employ anywhere from 20 to 50 souls, their numbers fluctuating with the seasons, the family's social aspirations, or the impending excitement of a grand wedding or a major hunting party. Within this miniature society, every single servant instinctively understands their exact position within the rigid hierarchy. The scullery maid, her hands perpetually chapped from dishwater, would never dare presume to address the steward directly unless first spoken to, nor would the stable boy ever initiate conversation with a lady's maid, no matter how fleeting their encounter. Everyone has a designated place, a carefully carved niche, and to forget it, even for a moment, is to invite the chilling prospect of being replaced by someone who remembers, someone who, perhaps, needed your position a little more desperately. At the very apex of this bustling servant hierarchy stand figures like the formidable steward or the ever-watchful housekeeper. They are the privileged few who might possess their own small, albeit Spartan, private rooms, perhaps even the coveted jingle of a key. Their days are consumed, not with menial labor, but with the complexities of management, meticulous accounting, inventory oversight, and the delicate diplomacy required when dealing with suppliers or esteemed visiting officials. Yet, even these powerful figures must stir before the sun crests the horizon. For any servant, high or low, to linger in bed past dawn is to invite a chilling wave of suspicion, a whispered doubt about their loyalty and diligence. Now, follow a young woman. Let's call her Alara for a moment, as she glides silently past the other waking forms. She's been assigned to the solar, the private chamber, where the lady of the house still slumbers. This isn't a post she actively sought, but her selection speaks volumes about her quiet footsteps and remarkably steady hands. She knows, inherently, that speaking before being addressed is an egregious error, that a knock too loud on the heavy oak door could shatter the fragile morning peace, and that meeting her mistress's gaze directly, unless specifically invited, is an unthinkable transgression. These are the unspoken rules etched into her very being. Before her mistress's eyes even flutter open, Ilara will meticulously lay out the day's wardrobe. Her choices are dictated by the morning's weather and the day's expected social calendar. Thick, warming wool, if the air hangs damp and heavy, or perhaps the finest, most delicate linen, if esteemed guests are anticipated to grace the manor. Any precious jewelry remains secured within its locked chest. Her calloused, work-worn fingers know better than to ever brush against such delicate, valuable items. For her, touching them would be like touching a world entirely separate from her own rough reality. She knows her place. In stark contrast, somewhere deeper within the manor's sprawling belly, the kitchen is now a cacophony of nascent activity. The aroma of fresh bread, still unbaked, mingles with the faint promise of simmering porridge. The cook, a force of nature in his own right, is already letting loose a string of low, guttural curses by the time the next bleary-eyed servant stumbles through the door. The massive kitchen fire, though never truly extinguished overnight, demands constant, vigorous tending. forever hungry for more wood, more fuel. The air in this cavernous space is a thick, choking blend of wood smoke, old grease, and the palpable, sharp scent of raw ambition. This cook, you see, is not merely a man of pots and pans. He is a man of formidable temperament, a master of his domain, who has already seen 3 noble families come and go, outlasted 2 lords, you know, and has a rather formidable reputation for throwing knives, never in anger, mind you, always just for emphasis. A queen of subtle theatrics, perhaps. Outside, the world remains shrouded in a deep pre-dawn gloom. Look closely, and you might just catch a whisper of silver stretching along the eastern horizon, a faint promise that the sun will eventually bother to rise. For now, though, the chapel bell, high in its stone tower, hangs utterly silent, but you know its voice. Soon that low, resonant peal will ripple through the manor, shaking the household awake like a slumbering beast. Nobles will be summoned to prayer, servants jolted into tireless motion. This isn't just a clock, it's the rhythm of their lives, marking the day into sacred sections, morning prayers, the noon meal, the evening vigil. Time, in this world, isn't kept for convenience. It's an act of obedience, a silent devotion to the rigid structure of their days. But before that first chime, time is measured differently, isn't it? It's counted in small, hidden actions. How many chamber pots have been silently emptied in the dark? How many hearths coaxed to life? How many footsteps taken in the hushed, almost invisible quiet of a waking manor? This manor, you see, isn't just stone and timber. It's a living entity, breathing, generating heat in constant, subtle motion, and its very lifeblood. That would be the servants, flowing tirelessly through its veins, sustaining it with their unseen labor. Imagine stepping into one of the long, drafty halls where the old rushes are being swept away. You'd catch the earthy scent of straw mingling with something fresher, perhaps marjoram, the sweet calm of lavender, or a sharp, clean hint of mint. These new herbs aren't scattered for luxury, let's be honest, but to mask the accumulated odors of days gone by. It's a task often delegated to the young girls, nimble and quick, or the older women whose backs haven't yet surrendered fully to their years. They move with quiet purpose, eyes fixed on their work, hands laden with straw and stem, a rustling symphony of diligent effort. Then you hear it, a deep, solemn clang that vibrates through the very stones beneath your feet. The bell, not a suggestion, but a command. The entire household seems to draw a collective breath. In the chapel, the family will gather, kneeling in their richly embroidered cloaks, their voices a low murmur echoing off the vaulted stone. Meanwhile, the servants, those permitted to attend at all, will stand stiffly at the back, a silent, watchful throng. Some pray, yes, perhaps for a better harvest or a kind master. Others just close their eyes, counting the slow, deliberate minutes until they can return to the pressing demands of the day. For it's only after this brief, communal pause that the real work begins. There's no fanfare, no grand chorus, just the scuffle of footsteps, the quiet exchange of instructions, and the deep, almost primal acceptance of endless repetition. Every single morning unfolds like this, never quite identical, yet always familiar in its relentless demands. You might notice a few among them who seem to thrive on this rhythm, finding a strange comfort in duty, a quiet purpose in predictability. They are the rare ones, perhaps, who truly belong to this world. Others simply endure it, their minds wandering to dreams of a few extra coins, the tantalizing whisper of escape, or the faint, almost impossible hope of advancement. A trusted valet, a promoted maid, instances so rare they become whispered legends. The vast majority, though, they just exist. They wake, they work, they sleep. The days for them slip away like water through open fingers, leaving barely a trace. Look there, a boy, still too young for bitterness, but too old for simple wonder, finishes tending a hearth, wiping the grit of soot from his already blackened hands. He moves on to the next cold room without a word. Down a different corridor, Marjorie carefully folds her mistress's nightdress, smoothing each crease with a practiced hand. She glances at the chamber pot, half full, just as expected, making a mental note for it to be changed. And no, you won't see her gag. That particular reaction, she'll tell you, mercifully passes within the first month. The steward, a man whose very soul seems calibrated to the integrity of the manor, paces the hall. His keen eyes scan for creaking beams, his mind already counting bolts of cloth in storage, his fingers testing a loose hinge with a flicker of mild disapproval. He is, after all, a man of hinges, in the bustling chaos of the kitchens. The cook, having already bellowed at 2 underlings and seared his thumb on the griddle, now bellows for the flour sack. He lifts it, feels its unexpected lightness, but says nothing, not yet. Oh, but rest assured, someone, somewhere, will be having a word with him later. And still, through all this unseen labor, the noble family sleeps on. Their dreams are undisturbed, their beds warmed, their floors swept clean, their slippers placed just so, waiting by the glowing embers of a freshly lit fire. None of this, you understand, happens by accident. It happens because, long before that first bell even thinks of chiming, someone rose in the unforgiving dark, pulled on rough wool, coaxed a struggling flame to life, took a deep, bracing breath, and began again. The morning's earliest tasks are rarely glamorous, are they? They're certainly not ceremonial, nor particularly honored, and often they're not even noticed by most of the household, but they are, without question, utterly essential. A great medieval household, even one nestled in modest nobility like this one, doesn't run on pageantry or grand pronouncements. No, it hums along on repetition, on the invisible engine of daily duties, long before the nobles sit down to their morning breakfast, before prayers are mumbled in the chapel, before the cook has even decided someone has dared to oversalt the stew. These duties are already underway. Small, yes, invisible often, but vital beyond measure. Fires, floors, and footsteps. That is where the day truly begins. And it's the fires that come first, not the grand roaring hearths of the great hall. That spectacle will come later, much later. No, these initial flames are for warmth, for the sheer necessity of pushing back against the clinging cold, not for show. They are coaxed into being in the chilly kitchens, in the humble servant halls, in dim storerooms, and within the private chambers of the household, each one lit by a careful, knowing hand. Too little breath, and the struggling flame will sputter out, mocking your efforts. Too much, and the ashes will flare up into your face like an angry, hissing cat. It's an art, really, a quiet mastery. You'll rarely hear troubadours singing epic ballads about the unsung glory of the scullion who lit the main kitchen fire without losing an eyebrow, will you? But perhaps, just perhaps, they should. Imagine a boy, perhaps just past his 11th year, or maybe not quite, kneeling before a small hearth in the outer kitchen. His knees press hard against the unforgiving, cold stone. He leans in, blowing gently into the pile of ash, his young eyes narrowed in concentration. His fingers are already smudged black with soot, and the day has barely even begun its slow ascent. With meticulous care, he tucks a twist of kindling beneath the grates, his breath fogging visibly in the frigid air, coaxing a lone, stubborn ember to life. The cold is biting here, the kind that seeks out every seam in your wool tunic, creeps past your skin, and settles deep into your very bones. But there's simply no time to dwell on such discomfort. Nearby, a girl, perhaps a year or two older, struggles with 2 heavy wooden buckets of water from the courtyard. Well, the pale wood thuds heavily against her thigh with each weary step. Her arms already ache, a dull throb, and this is only her 3rd trip of the morning. She balances the sloshing weight with practiced precision. Too much carelessness, and her gown will be soaked. And wet wool, you see, is a misery all its own. It clings, it chills, it chafes mercilessly. But again, these thoughts must be pushed aside. The laundry maid is waiting. Any delay here means a delay in the washing, which means a delay in the dressing. And let's be very clear, nobody delays the dressing of the lady of the house, not if they value their position. Now, let's turn our attention for a moment to the floors. The floor of a medieval manor hall, you must understand, is not the polished wood or soft velvet carpets you might imagine in your modern daydreams. Oh no, here the floors are rough stone or packed earth, often generously strewn with rushes. These aren't merely for decoration. They serve a deeply practical purpose, designed to absorb inevitable spills, collect the daily refuse, and help to muffle the constant stream of footsteps. But they cannot stay forever. They must be replaced regularly, swept out, perhaps tossed to the waiting pigs, or burned, leaving the faint scent of smoke and old straw behind. You walk into the great hall, and the air immediately shifts. A faint, earthy sweetness tickles your nose. Those fragrant herbs you sometimes forget about, strewn meticulously over the rushes. A clever trick, isn't it? Not for aesthetic pleasure, mind you, but to mask the less agreeable smells that inevitably cling to stone and timber, especially when a few dozen souls live under one roof. Your gaze drops, drawn to the lowest rung of this bustling hierarchy, the scullery maids. Untested, unlucky, sometimes barely more than children. Their hands are already rough, knuckles swollen from endless scrubbing. You can almost feel the ache in their knees as they move with a practiced slowness, a quiet ballet of drudgery. One girl, her face smudged with ash, guides a crude broom of bound twigs in a gentle, rhythmic arc. Another follows, a wooden pan held steady, collecting the day's detritus, crusts of bread, gnawed bones, cold ash from yesterday's fires, and yes, sometimes a tiny, stiff mouse. They never rush, because haste here only serves to whip the dust into a suffocating cloud. Why stir up trouble, right? Then the cadence changes. Footsteps, not just the sound, but their destination, their purpose. Who takes them? Who truly hears them? Because here, footsteps are the pulse of the manor, a silent language of life unfolding. You might notice a young maid, her pace quick and efficient, gliding through the west corridor. Clean linens, crisply folded, are cradled in her arms, smelling faintly of lye and fresh air. She offers a polite nod to the steward, a fleeting gesture of respect he doesn't bother to return. He's a man of numbers, you see, eternally consumed by his tally. Bedsheets, candles, bolts of precious cloth, even the very servants themselves. Everything must be accounted for, a constant ledger in his mind. Meanwhile, out in the courtyard, a different kind of morning begins. The stable hands are already at their posts, the chill, damp air thick with the earthy scent of hay, rich manure, and worn leather. The horses, restless and eager, are making their presence known. A sharp kick against a wooden stall, the impatient snort and flare of nostrils from a magnificent gray mare. A young stable boy, surprisingly gentle, murmurs to them in a low, soothing tone. He offers these powerful beasts more genuine courtesy than he'd likely extend to most people, wouldn't you say? Follow an older servant now, his breath misting slightly as he ascends a narrow, winding stairwell. He carries a heavy bucket of glowing coals and a slender iron tool, his mission crucial to relight the brazier in the Lord's solar. The floor must be welcomingly warm when the noble's foot eventually graces it. A cold floor is, simply put, an affront to decency. He moves with practiced speed, yet his movements are precise, almost reverent. A single speck of soot on that richly embroidered rug. Unthinkable. Not that the Lord himself would notice, of course, but the lady's maid. Ah, she misses nothing. Her eyes are like a hawk's, sharp and all-seeing. Meanwhile, down in the buttery, where the air is cool and smells faintly of yeast and wood, you'll find the tapster. His name is probably lost to time, but his purpose is clear. He moves among the towering ale barrels, thumping each one with a flat, calloused hand, listening intently for any telltale hollowness. He then dips a wax-marked stick to gauge the levels, each barrel sealed tightly with pitch and linen. If a leak is discovered, or even a suspiciously low level, well, let's just say it would be his neck on the line, quite literally. Ale theft isn't just a minor transgression here, it's a serious offense. Though you can hardly blame a tired servant for wishing for a slightly softer landing into slumber, can you? A new warmth begins to creep into the air, a subtle promise. The sun hasn't fully breached the horizon yet, but its presence is undeniable, spilling a soft, dim, golden glow through the leaded windows. The real day is poised to begin, and with it, a fresh wave of duties. You might glance into the washroom, where everything is being meticulously prepared. Crisp, clean towels are neatly laid out, perhaps smelling faintly of sunshine from where they were dried. A shallow copper basin now holds water, gently steaming, heated by a poker recently drawn from a roaring fire. This is where the noble family will perform their morning ablutions, faces and hands only, mind you, before their prayers. A full bath, that's a far rarer indulgence, not a daily affair, but a fresh face and combed hair, absolutely essential. Even minor nobility must always project an image of effortless refinement. Just outside the privy chamber, a young girl crouches, a look of grim resignation on her face. She's drawn the dreaded short straw. You realize the night jars await. A simple ceramic pot, sometimes brass for the more particular, but it must be carried out with utmost discretion, emptied and scoured. No one, certainly not the noble family, wants to be reminded of the mundane realities of bodily functions. That kind of stark realism is strictly confined to the lower floors, far from their elevated sensibilities. Closer to the hearth, you'll find a young boy, barely taller than the roaring flames, diligently turning a meat spit. A plump leg of mutton hangs from the iron hook, slowly revolving, a promise of a future feast. It's certainly not breakfast fare, but in this world, preparation begins at the earliest light. The cook, a formidable presence, has been muttering darkly about unconfirmed visitors since last night. Best to be over-prepared, wouldn't you agree? A cold roast, served 2 unexpected guests is practically an unforgivable sin in a noble house. The remarkable thing is how these dozens of staff move. They operate almost without explicit instruction, a complex, living machine. Their roles are ingrained not through formal lessons, but by tireless imitation, endless repetition, and the occasional sharp cuff to the ear. A new servant quickly learns to observe not just what is done, but how it's done. The subtle pauses, the knowing glances, when to speak, and more importantly, when to remain utterly silent. Hierarchy here is as foundational as the stone walls themselves. The steward looms over the chamberlain, who in turn stands above the grooms, and they above the scullery boys, and all, of course, beneath the noble family, who themselves answer only to the monarch and, well, God, depending on who happens to be watching at the moment. But within this strict pecking order, you quickly discern a fascinating dance of subtle ranks among the servants themselves. Take the lady's maid, for instance. She might be born to a humbler station than the formidable cook, yet her intimate proximity to the noble family bestows surprising privileges. Better scraps from the kitchen, perhaps a slightly finer fabric for her livery, even a private room with a proper door, a luxury many others can only dream of, or the laundress, plain-spoken and unassuming, who, with every scrub of the Lord's linens, uncovers more secrets than any whispered rumor. A truly good servant understands their place, of course, but the clever ones, they master the art of maneuvering within its confines. Then, a deep, resonant sound pierces the air. The chapel bell, it tolls, almost mournfully, its vibrations humming through the ancient stones, echoing like a collective sigh throughout the halls. It's a summons, not by name, but by its very tone. The nobles are called to prayer, the servants to their final surge of motion. Feet shuffle across rushes, heads bow, perhaps not always out of devotion, but certainly out of ingrained habit. And just like that, the first phase of the day draws to its quiet close. The fires now blaze brightly. The floors are swept clean. The purposeful footsteps have completed their initial work. Soon, the noble family will stir, and the grand performance of the day will truly begin. But for this fleeting moment, beneath the towering stones and glint of polished silver, the vibrant heartbeat of the manor pulses on, a silent, enduring rhythm. You've glimpsed the grand halls, haven't you? The fires roaring, casting dancing shadows on polished floors, the rhythmic echo of elegant footsteps. These are the unsung rhythms of a bustling household, the ceaseless tasks that make the visible splendor possible. And the food, oh, the food. Piles of it, sometimes like a painter's dream. Glistening roasted meats, golden pies with delicate lattice crusts, fresh-caught trout laid out like jewels, sweet confections, fragrant cheeses wrapped in herbs, and crusty loaves pulled from the oven's mouth, still whispering steam. It all gleams on ornate platters, carved with practiced grace, and served on trestle tables beneath rafters that tell stories in their wood, and painted beams that sing of ancient lore. Nobles dine with delicate fingers, or with knives so fine they've never, in all their lives, had to confront the indignity of a turnip. But, let's be honest, that's not really the feast we're here to witness, is it? No, our path lies elsewhere. We'll leave the airy grandeur above, descending past those stoic carved angels and the solemn dignity of oaken panels. The air shifts as we move through a narrow, winding passageway, a hidden artery leading down deeper into the clamor of the kitchens. And from there, just a little further, we'll find ourselves in the servants' hall. This, you see, is where the asterisk rests. Asterisk of the food finds its destination, or, more accurately, what's asterisk left asterisk of it. The very term leftovers doesn't quite capture the meticulous, almost ritualistic nature of the practice here. In a truly well-managed, noble home, the distribution of sustenance is a carefully calibrated art, a matter of strict hierarchy and precisely recorded rations. Who receives what, how much, how frequently. These intricate details are scrutinized, like sacred texts, by the steward, the head cook. And if the whispers are to be believed, even by the watchful eye of God himself, at the very pinnacle of the servant hierarchy, those fortunate souls closest to the noble family, perhaps the meticulous steward, the attentive lady's maid, the learned chaplain, or even the patient tutor, they experience a slightly different reality. While they do sometimes take their meals below stairs, not always is this the case. On certain designated days, a discreet privilege is extended, permission to dine in the quiet privacy of their own chambers. Food is brought to them with a quiet rustle, a plate of cold roast, perhaps a generous wedge of hard cheese, or a small jug of ale. Nothing extravagant, mind you, nothing to cause undue notice, but certainly a step above what awaits the general staff. It's a quiet acknowledgement of their station, a subtle yet palpable difference that settles like a fine dust in the air. As for the servants' hall itself, you might need a moment to adjust your eyes and your nose. It's a space that seems to stretch long and dim, with ceilings so low they almost press down on you, carrying a faint, persistent scent of damp wool and old onions. Here, the meal is a distinctly different affair, a daily ritual entirely unlike the banquets above. It always begins with bread. Asterisk, always asterisk bread. This isn't the fluffy, refined white stuff, sieved and spiced and lovingly shaped with buttered hands for the great hall. Oh no, this is blackburr, coarse, dark, and wonderfully dense. It's baked from hardy barley, or rye, or sometimes maslin, a resilient blend of wheat and rye, grown side by side, solid, heavy. It fills you in the way that stones fill a sack, settling deep in your gut, a promise of strength for the long hours ahead. After the bread, pottage arrives, a stew of sorts, though depending on the day's meager offerings, calling it stew might be a touch generous. It's a thick, hearty soup, a testament to resourcefulness, crafted from whatever humble ingredients are available: beans, peas, onions, leeks, the ubiquitous cabbage, and a medley of herbs. If fortune, that fickle mistress, truly smiles upon them, it might even boast a base of rich bone broth. Sometimes, just sometimes, a tiny scrap of meat is boiled within, not so much for sustenance as for the ghostly memory of flavor. More often than not, however, that elusive morsel has vanished by the time it reaches your bowl. But you learn not to complain. A servant's stomach is a disciplined thing, trained to hope cautiously, to accept what is given without question. Because if the pottage is thin today, well, perhaps it will be thicker tomorrow. If the bread is hard, you learn to soften it, dipping it in your ale. And if the ale itself happens to be a touch sour, or a little flat, it's still keeping the dirty water from killing you, isn't it? A practical concern, if ever there was one. Speaking of ale, that's the one thing that tends to flow relatively freely in most medieval kitchens. Not out of any particular generosity from the manor, mind you, but because clean, potable water is, more often than not, highly suspect. The ale, brewed in enormous wooden barrels and served in rough tin cups, is weak, barely alcoholic, but wonderfully nourishing. Children drink it without a second thought. The elderly sip it slowly. It's simply safer than the gurgling stream outside. And, if you're lucky, it might even be warmer than the icy well water. The meal is consumed swiftly, a flurry of hands and spoons, not because it's particularly delicious, though hunger is the finest sauce, but because there is always, more work to be done. You and the others sit on long, unyielding benches. The table itself is bare, darkened wood, deeply stained and worn smooth from generations of leaning elbows and countless spills. There are no delicate napkins here, no gleaming salt dishes, certainly no silver forks to be found. You eat with a simple spoon, if you're lucky enough to still possess yours, or with your fingers. And if your spoon has gone missing, as these things often do, well, you borrow one from a neighbor, or you go without. Conversation is permitted, yes, but only in moderation. A low hum of weary voices, laughter, that's a rare and precious sound in this hall. The general tone is subdued, shaped less by solemnity and more by sheer, profound exhaustion. Some of you might glance upwards, not in prayer, but toward the floorboards above, imagining the noble family who will soon sit down to their first meal, surrounded by carved fruit bowls and crisp linen cloths. The stark difference isn't painful, not in the sharp sting of injustice, but rather a quiet, deep understanding. It has simply always been this way. In the grander households, where the machinery of service is more complex, a dedicated official oversees the provisioning. The pantler, a diligent guardian, manages all the bread and the precious stores of food. The butler, with a keen eye, stands watch over the wine and the ever-important ale. And the kitchener, the orchestrator of all things culinary, directs the preparation. Each of these individuals watches the others with a subtle, yet ever-present, suspicion. If the bread stores are found wanting, it falls squarely on the pantler's shoulders. If the ale has, by some mystery, been watered down, the butler faces the blame. And should a whole side of beef vanish without a trace, the cook, naturally, finds himself under intense scrutiny. Beneath these key figures, the countless hands who do the actual carrying, the chopping, the boiling, and the endless cleaning, well, they are only ever questioned when something, quite simply, goes wrong. Otherwise, their role is to be utterly silent, to move through their tasks like shadows. Now, it's worth noting that not all sustenance destined for the lower ranks arrives directly in the servants' hall. Some of it, you see, is scavenged. And let's be clear, there's a vital difference between scavenging and outright stealing. When a platter returns to the kitchen, its contents half-eaten, it undergoes a swift, pragmatic inspection. If a plump capon is barely touched, it might be cleverly repurposed into a pie for tomorrow's noble table. But if it's deemed too far gone for the gentry, it might then be passed down to the staff. Often, though, it goes to the eager dogs first, the four-legged cleaners of the castle. Yet the truly clever servants, those with sharp eyes and quicker hands, know precisely where the best morsels hide. They're found in the scraps left from the carving, in the last ends of cheese forgotten on a serving board, or within a fruit bowl that sags just a little under its own ripeness. A quick-witted lad might pocket an apple. A nimble girl might tuck a slice of bread deep into her apron. These actions are never performed openly, of course, but they are done. It's not about greed, you understand. It's about pure, unadulterated sustenance. Servants toil through incredibly long hours, their bodies constantly lifting, bending, scrubbing, hauling. Calories, in this world, are not a luxury, they are survival. A boy who skips his breakfast is a boy far more likely to drop a platter. And a dropped platter, my friend, is quite literally a career-ending mistake. On feast days, the entire rhythm of the manor shifts, vibrating with a different, almost frenzied energy. The noble family dines lavishly, obscenely so. Dozens upon dozens of dishes parade before them. Intricate trenches carved from stale bread, succulent roasted game birds, rich spiced wines, exotic sugared dates, and jellies molded into fantastic animal shapes. Meanwhile, the servants, you, must double your labor. The kitchen transforms into a veritable furnace of activity, a sweltering inferno of heat and steam. Hands burn, feet blister with relentless pounding, and tempers fray, stretched thin as the last threads of a worn tapestry. The cacophony is deafening, the air thick with the smell of roasting meat and sweat, as the pressure mounts and the hours. But let's talk about those rare, whispered moments, shall we? You know, the ones that make the grit and grind of the day worth it, if only for a fleeting instant. When the last noble has retreated to their chambers, and the great hall finally falls silent, sometimes, just sometimes, a different kind of bounty awaits. Perhaps the steward, feeling generous or simply overwhelmed by the bounty, will declare a staff feast. A secondary table, often scarred and worn, is hastily laid, adorned with the remains of the upstairs indulgence. You might find roast bones, picked with meticulous care, now offering their last vestiges of flavor. Perhaps a pie, its crust long gone, but its sweet fruit filling miraculously intact, just begging for a finger. A stray honeyed fig, sticky and rich, left behind. It's not much by their standards, but in a world dominated by the bland, gray porridge and the endless boiled beans, this tastes like pure, unadulterated sign. You've seen it yourself, haven't you? A young scullery boy once bit into a discarded sugared plum, forgotten on a silver platter, and just wept. He'd never known such sweetness could exist. But let's be honest, these moments are as rare as a warm bath in winter. Most days unfold in a monotonous rhythm, a relentless cycle of black bread, thick pottage, and the ever-present ale. If the cook is feeling particularly benevolent, a rare alignment of the stars, indeed, perhaps an egg. The meals for the household staff dictate your day. A quick bite before the nobles stir, another after their midday repast, and finally a snatched supper long after the last gleaming silver goblet has been polished and tucked away. Servants eat quickly, often on their feet. The kitchen, a ceaseless inferno. No, the kitchen simply does not stop. The hearth's hungry maw demands constant vigilance, its orange glow flickering across your weary face. The delicate pastry, destined for a noble's discerning palate, must be shielded from the scorching flames, while the stew, bubbling with the day's meager offerings, requires an unending stir. Sometimes you eat on the move, a crust of hard bread clutched in a rag, a spoonful of broth slurped behind a heavy oak door, or a handful of raw, earthy peas popped into your mouth as you pass. The cook, a man whose temper is as fiery as his ovens, permits no lounging. There are few sights more offensive to his tyrannical gaze than a seated scullion, jaw working contentedly, a full mouth signifying a moment of forbidden rest. And yet, even within this austere diet, a subtle variety exists, a whisper of the changing seasons. The year's turning brings forth different gifts, doesn't it? Spring, with its gentle touch, offers up a bounty of fresh greens, stinging nettles, pungent leeks, and sharp garlic that cuts through the fat of the simplest broth. As summer's sun ripens the fields, you might find sweet cherries, plump peas, and crisp beans making their way to the staff table. Autumn, with its golden hues, brings forth a harvest of apples, robust onions, and the satisfying crunch of nuts. Winter, though, well, winter is a lean mistress, offering little unless the larder was meticulously prepared, its shelves groaning with the fruits of the warmer months. In a way, each of you holds a ration book, not a physical ledger, but one etched into the steward's memory and the shared understanding of the household. It's an unspoken agreement, a set of invisible lines you dare not cross. 3 loaves of bread per week, a hearty pot of pottage each day, and ale twice daily to wash it all down. Meat, that precious luxury, is reserved for Sundays, and even then, it's a slim chance, a small portion if it appears at all. Every morsel is accounted for, either mentally by the steward or meticulously noted on a scroll if he possesses the rare gift of literacy. To take more than your allotted share isn't just theft, it's a disruption, a dangerous ripple in the careful balance of the house. Others would simply go without, and the entire edifice of routine upon which this world rests would begin to crumble. Yet, you observe that not all servants endure the same hardships. Isn't that just like life, even below stairs? Hierarchy, like a stubborn weed, finds a way to flourish everywhere. The steward, with his access to ledgers and keys, undoubtedly dines better than the stable boy, whose days are filled with the earthy tang of manure and the low nicker of horses. The nursemaid, tending to the noble children, likely finds more substantial fare than the spit boy, whose days are a blur of heat and the rhythmic turning of a roasting carcass. But among the lower ranks, where the shared struggle binds you, a certain camaraderie blossoms. Bread is broken and passed. Pottage bowls are silently offered down the line. A young laundress, her hands chapped from endless scrubbing, might whisper, "Eat mine," pushing her bowl across the rough-hewn table before hurrying back to her steamy work. Small mercies, traded like precious coins, keep spirits from entirely breaking. After the hurried meal, the bowls are gathered, not often for a thorough washing. Water, you see, is a precious commodity, and soap an extravagant luxury. Instead, they are scraped clean with a blunt knife, wiped with a cloth, perhaps even rinsed with a splash of leftover ale, the metallic temps masking the residue of 1,000 previous meals. Your spoon, worn smooth by countless journeys to mouth, slips back into the familiar warmth of your apron pocket. Any remaining scraps are unceremoniously tossed to the eager dogs, the grunting pigs, or simply cast into the hungry, crackling heart of the fire. The table is wiped clean, its surface bearing the ghosts of meals past, and the heavy bench is pushed back into place with a dull thud. Just like that, it's over. There is no lingering, no sweet dessert to savor, no hushed conversations about philosophy, or the day's hunt, or the latest political whisperings that, you understand, belongs to the world upstairs. Below stairs, meals are moments of necessary silence, a brief pause for sustenance. They exist only to fill your stomach just enough to keep your hands moving, your back bending, and the endless hours passing. They are not memories to be cherished. They are simply fuel. Tomorrow there will be more bread, more pottage, more of the same. And so it continues, day after relentless day. Now, serving a noble lady, that's an entirely different kind of service. Wouldn't you agree? It's not like the kitchens, where the fierce heat blisters your skin, and the cook's bellowing is a constant, wounded roar echoing off the stone walls. Nor is it like the stables, where at least the unpleasantness, the smells of straw and horse, are predictable in their consistency. No, this particular kind of work, the meticulous duties of a lady's maid, demands a different nature altogether. It's a quieter role, more delicate, certainly, but no less exacting in its demands. A noble household is a complex tapestry of hierarchy, and within its intricate weave, the lady's maid occupies a truly curious position. You're not quite at the bottom, certainly not at the top, but you are uniquely, intimately close. You may eat the same coarse bread and wear the same rough wool as the lowliest scullery maid, but you are privy to the inner chambers of power, emotion, and vulnerability. You see the Baroness without her elaborate veil, her face unadorned, hearing her speak without the practiced performance she maintains for the world outside her solar. You know the exact scent of her favored perfume, a delicate dance of rose and amber, and more importantly, you know what she smells like without it, the faint temps of sleep, perhaps, or the soft musk of her own skin. And perhaps more than any other servant, you must constantly remember the precariousness of your position. It can vanish as quickly as a wisp of smoke, overnight, with a single careless word or a forgotten task. Let's step into the solar, shall we? You know it well. It's a small, intimate chamber, yet richly appointed, its walls draped with tapestries that hum with silent stories. Cushions, plump and soft, invite repose, and the air is delicately scented with the subtle whisper of dried lavender and crushed mint, a comforting, familiar embrace. The wooden shutters are drawn open just a crack, allowing the morning light to filter in, diffused into a soft, golden haze by oiled parchment panes. There's a beautifully carved chair by the small, crackling fire, a box overflowing with gleaming embroidery silks tucked neatly beneath it, and a half-reed psalter lying open on the cushioned bench, its pages hinting at quiet devotions. And at the far end of the room, you, let us call you Joan for a moment, are meticulously folding a linen shift, your movements precise and practiced. You've been awake for some time now, haven't you? The lady of the house, after all, does not rise with the rude clang of the morning bell. Her mornings begin only when the hearth fire has been coaxed back to life, its warmth chasing away the chill when the water has been heated to the perfect temperature, and the polished basin placed just so on the intricately carved wooden stand. You've already fetched the day's garments from the heavy wooden chest, chosen with careful consideration the whims of the weather, the specific day of the week, and whether any important visitors are expected, all play a part. Today, it's a gown of deep green wool, its hem lined with soft squirrel fur, sturdy, respectable, but still gentle against the throat. The fur has been carefully brushed, the hem shaken free of dust, and the delicate lace checked for any telltale snags. A girdle of gleaming copper links, coiled neatly, sits beside it. The undercoat is laid out first, then the shift beneath that. You've placed her slippers by the fire, too warm, and now you wait. When the lady finally stirs, a soft rustle from the bed, you move quickly, but without the vulgarity of haste. You open the shutters a little wider, just enough to invite in the day, but not so much as to offend her sleepy eyes. You offer a gentle good tomorrow, my lady, then turn to the pitcher, pouring the warm water carefully into the basin, pale coils of steam rising like a morning prayer. The soft cloth is unfolded, wrung out just so, and then placed, and so the water, warm and fragrant, glides over the lady's delicate fingers. You observe the deliberate movements, the unhurried grace in every gesture. Nothing feels rushed, nothing is ever overlooked. There's a quiet, ancient rhythm to this ritual, a flow Joan has mastered over countless mornings. Once the last drop of water is gently blotted from her face, your attention turns, as it always does, to her hair. The simple sleeping coif is carefully removed, and you begin to comb the boxwood teeth, smooth and oiled from years of devoted use, whispering softly from scalp to tip. A noblewoman's hair is her crown, her pride, and it demands reverence. No pulling, no snagging, just slow, meticulous care. You know the styles, of course. Some ladies prefer intricate braids, others a fine net of gold, or perhaps the chaste drape of a wimple. But today, the instruction is clear. It will be twisted and elegantly pinned beneath a silk veil. With a practiced motion, you retrieve the pins, small, sharp slivers of carved bone, and slip them, one by one, into your mouth. Their cool points, a familiar presence against your tongue, as your hands continue their intricate dance. You work steadily. The only sound, the soft brush of hair and the lady's voice, a steady stream of observations. Not really a conversation, more of a monologue, wouldn't you say? She talks of courtly fashions, perhaps the embarrassing way Lady Marjorie's heavy gown dragged through the feast hall's rushes, or the persistent rumble of her husband's snoring. She might even lament her sister's perpetually poor Latin in letters, asterisk, why does this always happen? Asterisk, you offer only small, affirming murmurs, little sounds of interest, carefully calibrated to her mood. Never a contradiction, never a question, and certainly never a laugh unless it's explicitly invited. A delicate balance you've long mastered. You've learned to read the subtle shifts in her temperament, deciphering glances, pregnant pauses, and soft sighs more accurately than others. Read any book. Now the dressing begins. It's an art in itself. A slow, meticulous layering of fabric and form. First, the linen chemise, soft and cool, slips over her head, and your fingers work with quiet urgency, tugging gently at sleeves, fastening the tiny ties at the neck and cuffs. Then comes the kirtle, a close-fitting garment designed to sculpt the body and provide the underlying structure for the gown that will float above it. This piece requires lacing at the sides, a task you execute with practiced ease, one hand pulling the cord taut, the other deftly forming a knot. There's a soothing, almost hypnotic rhythm to it, a steady cadence that continues, provided, of course, that no wretched lace decides to snap mid-tug over the kirtle, the main event, the gown itself. Today, it's a rich forest green wool, lined with a luxurious band of fur at the cuffs and hem, heavier than it ever appears. You lift it carefully, holding it open, a momentary embrace of the fabric as you help her step in. Then, with a smooth motion, you guide it over her shoulders, aligning seams, and begin the intricate work of fastening the sides. You anticipate the small rebellion of that one particular loop, the one you've mended twice already, and handle it with extra care. Next, the girdle, a jeweled or embroidered belt, clasped low around the hips. And finally, the veil, which must be pinned just so, framing her face perfectly, never drawing attention to the wrong feature. The last touch, the soft, embroidered slippers. Once she is fully attired, you take a deliberate step back, your gaze sweeping over your handiwork. Is every fold precisely placed, every tie secured? If all is as it should be, you offer a small, almost imperceptible nod, and then, in a voice barely above a whisper, "Shall I bring the mirror, my lady?" The mirror, you know, isn't made of fragile glass. That is a shimmering extravagance reserved solely for the king's most intimate chambers. No, This is polished steel, reflecting enough of a likeness for her purpose. She leans in, tilting her head this way and that, a slight frown creasing her brow. You wait, perfectly still, as you have 1,000 times before. Eventually, the verdict, a simple, clipped phrase, "It will do." You curtsy, a shallow dip of the head, and step aside. The long day unfolds in a ballet of constant, quiet motion. You become a shadow, always 3 paces behind your mistress, moving from the sun-drenched private chamber to the echoing stone of the great hall. Your hands are never empty, carrying the sewing basket, the fine linen handkerchief, or perhaps a heavy cloak against a sudden chill. You step forward seamlessly to receive a whispered letter or to pass along an instruction, even offering a delicate drop of rose water to a guest suddenly overcome by the heat of the hearth. Always waiting in doorways, always listening. You speak only when directly addressed, your senses honed to the house's every secret. And believe me, there are secrets. Gossip, like a creeping ivy, wins its way through every household, but here it's cloaked in silks and sweetened with honeyed words. You hear it all, the hushed hints about the steward's questionable accounts, the veiled rumors of the Lord's latest dalliances, even the quiet complaints about the cook's increasingly coarse bread. Some of it is utter nonsense, of course, but much of it, you instinctively know, holds a kernel of truth. Yet, not a single word ever passes your lips. You've seen what happens to those who speak too freely, haven't you? Remember Agnes, the last maid, who grew a little too familiar with a visiting page boy. One careless, overheard word, and she was dismissed within the hour. No references, no wages, no second chances. You helped her pack. Neither of you spoke a single word in the quiet afternoon hours. While the lady busies herself with intricate embroidery or recites prayers from her well-worn psalter, you meticulously prepare the garments for the following day. You brush the soft fur linings, inspect the hems for stray threads, and air out the bodices, allowing a gentle breeze from the narrow window to freshen the fabric. Pins are sharpened to a needle point, buckles polished until they gleam, and any small tears are mended with a fine waxed thread, your needle dancing in the dappled light. When your lady succumbs to an afternoon nap, you too snatch a precious moment of rest, perched against the cool stone of the doorframe, head bowed, ever vigilant, always ready to rise at the slightest stir. As evening descends, painting the chamber in hues of fading light, you begin the ritual of preparing for night. Candles are lit, their soft glow chasing away the encroaching shadows, and heavy curtains are drawn, sealing the room in warmth and privacy. The night rail, a soft linen shift, is laid out, and a cloth, warmed by the fire, is placed around her shoulders. You assist with the undressing, slowly, carefully, each garment removed and folded with precise movements, forming neat stacks. Slippers are placed by the hearth, the girdle unfastened, the veil unpinned. Then her hair is brushed once more, 50 strokes at least, a soothing rhythm in the quiet room, before it's plaited loosely for sleep. If she's tired, you remain silent, a comforting presence. But if she wishes to speak, you listen, your attention absolute. There are moments, too, when the lady weeps softly, her face turned discreetly towards the wall. During these times, you simply extend a clean linen cloth without a word. You do not offer comfort. That would be a shocking presumption for one of your station. You offer quiet service. Later, your own rest comes on a humble straw pallet by the chamber door. Your day truly ends only when hers begins anew. There are nights, you know, when sleep never truly arrives, when she cries out in her dreams, or calls for water, or suddenly remembers an urgent message that must be sent. You rise without a murmur of complaint. This is simply the nature of your work. It is a position of undeniable closeness. Yes, a shared intimacy woven into the fabric of daily life. But closeness, you understand perfectly, is not, and never will be, the same as equality. Yet, despite the inherent imbalance, there is something truly remarkable in this unwavering rhythm, isn't there? The small, constant acts of care, the unspoken knowledge passed from hand to hand, day after day after day. Your lady never explicitly thanks you, not really, but you know deep down that your service is seen. And so the days unfold, one after another, in the soft rustle of fabric, in whispered instructions, and in perfectly tied laces. You find yourself now, perhaps, on the outer edges of this grand estate, where the rustle of noble silks and the delicate whisper of courtly gossip are merely distant echoes. But we're not here for the grace or the garments, are we? Forget the romantic notions. The kitchen isn't some cozy, beating heart of the manor, charmingly warm and inviting. No, no, my friend. It's the very furnace, the thrumming engine of this whole operation, belching smoke and sweat and simmering stews long before anyone else has even stirred from their feather beds, and hours after the last flickering candle in the great hall has been snuffed out. It isn't pretty. It certainly isn't genteel. And if you're a servant here, believe me, it is never, ever quiet. So, let's step down into it, shall we? The air immediately grows thick, heavy with the scent of 1,000 meals, past and present. Your eyes might need a moment to adjust to the dim light, catching only glimpses of stone walls, blackened and glazed with centuries of soot. In the very center, you see a cavernous hearth, easily large enough to roast an entire sheep whole, its fiery maw casting a dancing glow that warps the shadows. Overhead, from rough-hewn beams, hang a dozen iron hooks, waiting for their next heavy burden, while immense wooden tables, scarred and worn, are perpetually dusted with flour, crumbs, and that persistent, faint smear of animal fat. Take a deep breath, or perhaps don't. It smells, distinctively, of ash and sharp onions, the temps of sour ale, wet wood mingling with damp wool, and an ever-present layer of grease. And then there's that other smell, isn't there? Something burnt, something indefinable, something no one has quite dared to ask about. This kitchen, in a household of a wealthy baron or count, is less a room and more a kingdom unto itself. And like all good kingdoms, it has its undeniable ruler, the cook. You'll know him when you see him. A formidable figure who doesn't carry the soft, well-fed heft of a merchant. No, this man is thick-boned and solid, with arms like ham hocks, and a step that makes the very floorboards groan. His voice, imagine a dropped cauldron echoing through a stone vault, and his vocabulary is, shall we say, equally resonant. This is no greenhorn. He served in 4 different households, navigated the delicate politics of one lord's mistress, survived a couple of hunting accidents, miraculously, perhaps, and endured at least one food poisoning incident that he, with fiery conviction, insists was absolutely not his fault. He tolerates neither waste nor tardiness, nor, heaven forbid, incompetence, especially not from the spit boys. Ah, the spit boy. He's perhaps the lowest rung on this grimy ladder, isn't he? A lad usually between 10 and 13, all sharp angles and perpetually scorched skin, His job is, quite simply, to turn that enormous roasting spit, a heavy iron rod suspended directly over the roaring hearth, where hunks of meat rotate for hours on end. Turn it too slowly, and you'll char one side to a crisp. Too fast, and the meat cooks unevenly. The fat refuses to render. And if you stop altogether, well, let's just say there are whispers, dark tales of what happened to the last boy who dared to pause. He left, we hear, with a nasty welt across his back and a rather inconveniently broken tooth. Possibly unrelated, of course, possibly not. Beyond the spit, the kitchen swirls with what can only be described as organized chaos. Over there, the kitchener, a senior assistant to the cook, meticulously oversees the labyrinthine stores, barrels of barley, sacks of dried beans, salted fish, cured pork, countless eggs, and a mountain of root vegetables, alongside that ever-dwindling hoard of preserved plums. He keeps his tally not on expensive paper, but in a stout ledger, locked away, consulted only when suspicion, that unwelcome guest, begins to rear its head. Nearby, you see the scullery maid, her forearms a vivid red from the constant immersion in the wash trough, her apron soaked through and clinging. She scrubs pots blackened with soot until her muscles ache, hones knives dulled from endless use, and polishes pewter dishes, their rims dented and scarred from 1,000 careless drops. Her hands are never still, are they? And neither, it seems, is her mouth, which you'll often find muttering under her breath about someone else's egregious mess. Around them, the undercooks tend to the simmering, bubbling pots, one for thick pottage, another for savory sauces, and one, perhaps, for something that began its life as fish, but has, through the alchemy of heat and time, transformed into something else entirely. They stir with long wooden paddles, dodging the unpredictable sparks and scalding splashes. Burns are a common currency here. Blisters, they're simply ignored. A good kitchen maid, you see, quickly learns to keep moving, no matter what hot liquid happens to drip onto her shoes. This kitchen, my friend, is never truly still, for meals in the manor come in relentless waves. First, of course, comes breakfast, if you can even dignify it with such a name. For the nobility, it's a remarkably light affair, more a gesture of status than actual sustenance. Perhaps a delicate bread roll, a sliver of cold meat, a cup of warmed ale, or a diluted wine. They don't gorge themselves in the morning. They leave that to the people who actually perform physical labor, don't they? Yet, even for this modest meal, the kitchen flares to life. Bread must be precisely sliced, crusts trimmed just so. The right asterisk kind of cheese unearthed from its cool hiding place. The butter must be perfectly softened, and the ale, the ale must be carefully tasted for freshness by someone utterly trusted, and, crucially, not asterisk to asterisk eager to drink it all. The servant's own breakfast, taken earlier and swallowed quickly, is nothing so refined. Coarse bread, a spoonful of porridge if there's time, or perhaps just a handful of dried peas if there isn't. But the real asterisk frenzy, the true maelstrom of activity, begins well before dinner, which, in those days, was served around mid-morning or shortly thereafter. This is the grand event, the largest and most complex meal of the day for the noble family. Multiple courses, a succulent roast, a hearty soup, carefully boiled greens, perhaps a sweet tart or a creamy custard. In winter, you'd see starchy root vegetables and dried fruits. In summer, fresh aromatic herbs and soft, delicate cheeses. Each dish must be prepared with excruciating care, Not because the Lord is necessarily a connoisseur, but because, let's be honest, he's simply very, very easily offended. The cook's bellows cut through the din. More salt. No, not asterisk that asterisk salt. You donkey, the fine salt, who plucked this capon. It still has feathers on its leg. A kitchen boy, pale and terrified, scurries off with a limp bird. Another scrapes thick fat from a sizzling pan. A young girl is dispatched to the herb garden for parsley, only to return, inevitably, with mint. She's sent again. And you realize, don't you, that there's a hierarchy here that extends even to the ingredients themselves. Pork is common, a staple. Mutton is respectable enough. Beef, on the other hand, is less frequently seen, being expensive and notoriously difficult to keep fresh. Fowl is a treat, especially a plump goose or a regal swan. But the ultimate delicacy, the undisputed king of the table. Peacocks, they are roasted, then, with an astonishing flourish, their magnificent feathers are reattached before serving. Not for flavor, heaven forbid. It's all about the display, the sheer spectacle of it all. In fact, the last one nearly ignited when its glorious tail feathers were set a hair too close to the hearth. Sugar, imagine, is rarer than meat. It's kept under lock and key, a precious commodity used only in pies for grand feast days, or perhaps when the lady of the house finds herself in a particularly melancholy mood. Spices, meanwhile, are controlled like pure treasure. Saffron, cinnamon, cloves, pepper. Pepper, in particular, is literally weighed out. If a servant uses even a pinch too much without explicit permission, they might find their wages docked, or worse, accused of outright theft. A missing spoonful of cloves, believe it or not, can be a criminal matter. As the meal is finally plated, it's not the cook, despite all his roaring and effort, who carries it forth from this fiery domain. No, that honor falls to the servers, the footmen, or the pages, impeccable in their livery, each with impeccably clean hands and steady, practiced feet. Presentation, you understand, is absolutely everything. A tray dropped in front of the Lord could very well be a death knell. Figuratively, of course, usually. But even as the opulent dishes vanish through the kitchen doorway, destined for the great hall, back here in the kitchen, the peekaboo watch as the weary cook, having snatched a fleeting moment of repose, quickly pushes himself up again. The sky outside the kitchen's grimy windows is bleeding into hues of deep violet and fading orange. Dusk approaches, signaling the supper bell. This evening meal, smaller than the midday feast, often relies on cunning reinvention for the Lord's table. Perhaps yesterday's roast, now minced and encased in a savory crust, or a custard firmed up once more. But for the tireless hands toiling around you, supper is often a less dignified affair. You see the glint of metal scraping the bottom of a pot, collecting whatever meager remnants cling stubbornly to the iron. Sometimes it's just enough. Other times the gnawing emptiness lingers. A small hand reaches out, furtively, snapping a piece of cooling pie crust, and you catch the cook's knowing glance, a silent, shared secret, unacknowledged, as long as no one else is looking. The heart of this kitchen, you realize, is the colossal hearth where a fire eternally breathes. It never truly dies, does it? Each night, glowing embers are carefully banked, ash piled high, and coals gently coaxed inward, a living entity tended in shifts. To let that fire extinguish completely, to necessitate the arduous task of relighting it from cold, tinder, and flint, is an unforgivable sin, a transgression the cook would brand you with for weeks. Beyond the flames, A silent code governs this scorching domain, etched not in parchment, but in shared fear. You learn quickly, never touch the steaming roast before the cook's knife descends. Do not even dream of tasting from the ladle. The finer bowls are strictly for the Lord's table, not your watery stew. And for heaven's sake, don't you dare sit before the cook does. Most crucially, never sing. The last lad who dared to hum a tune during pudding making found himself banished to the stench of the stables for a full week, returning with only the ghost of a melody under his breath. But then there are the festivals, aren't there? The entire rhythm of the manor shifts, and the kitchen, my friend, morphs into a frantic, glorious war zone. The air vibrates with the clatter of 100 pans and the roar of a dozen voices, all competing with the spitting fire. You'd witness a spectacle. Dozens of pies, a whole boar roasted to perfection, with an apple clutched in its snout, spiced wine bubbling in vast vats, custards molded into fantastical beasts. Imagine the dishes crafted purely to dazzle. A fish pie, for instance, where live birds are sealed within, meant to burst forth in a flurry of wings and feathers when the crust is cut, a true marvel when it works, and an utter feathery mess when it doesn't. On these days, you barely catch your breath, let alone a proper meal, constantly carrying, pouring, fetching, and scrubbing. Yet, if the cook's temper mellows, a true treat might come your way. A marrow bone passed surreptitiously to a scullery maid, or a precious lick of honey scraped from a gilded bowl. Finally, as the last guest departs and the grand hall falls silent, its candles guttering into darkness, the kitchen breathes out. The air, thick with the ghosts of roasted meats and stale wine, slowly cools. You see the cook wipe a weary brow, the young spit boy slide down a soot-stained wall into a heap, and the scullery maid plunge her reddened arms into the trough one last, defiant time. It's hot, isn't it? And truly, it feels endless, often poorly paid. But at least it's safer than the unforgiving fields, warmer than the damp stables. So they endure, knowing that long before dawn breaks, water must boil once more. For all the roaring hearths and dazzling feasts, the true engine of this manor operates elsewhere. Behind every plucked goose, every tallied coin, every tapped barrel of ale, you'll find him, the steward. He doesn't cook, doesn't mend, doesn't serve. Yet absolutely nothing moves without his nod. His domain isn't the bustling hall or the verdant fields, but a quiet, ink-stained desk nestled in the solar's outer chamber. Here, in this hushed space, surrounded by towering shelves laden with brittle scrolls, weighty ledgers, and an assortment of tally sticks and heavy seals, he truly governs. Let's talk about his books, shall we? Not the romantic tales you might imagine, but instead these dry, formidable things, leather-bound, with edges often rough from years of handling. Page after page, you'd find endless columns, names, numbers, meticulous records of debts and deliveries. There's no poetry within these pages, only the stark reality of dates, precise weights, and perhaps the quiet anxiety of arithmetic painstakingly performed by flickering candlelight. Every sack of flour, every bolt of wool, every bushel of oats is recorded. This man, you realize, knows exactly how many hens should be laying, precisely how much ale has mysteriously vanished, and can tell you how many candles illuminated the lady's vigil last Tuesday. A wax tablet rests beside him, continually scratched and smoothed clean, his fingers permanently stained with ink, his back stiff from countless hours of sitting. He isn't one for theatrics. He is, above all, a man of meticulous detail, and you can be sure he sees everything. Every morning, long before the matins bell chimes across the misty grounds, you'd see him. He takes his precise walk around the estate, not for the invigorating fresh air. He'd far prefer the comfort of his chair, but for meticulous surveillance. His sharp gaze sweeps across the courtyard, instantly registering a wobbling cartwheel, a leaning fence post, or a pig looking suspiciously lean. He pauses by the stables. "Too much straw wasted last week," he might mutter, making a swift, silent note. He glances at the curing ladder. Fewer hams than anticipated. Another quick scratch. The staff, you'll notice, practically vibrate with industry whenever he's nearby. A servant, lingering by the well, is simply inviting scrutiny. His pace is unsettlingly brisk, just enough to put you on edge. He speaks sparingly, but when his voice finally cuts the morning air, it carries immense weight. Why was the linen order late? Why is the barley delivery light? Where are those 3 candles missing? He rarely needs to raise his voice. He calculates your wages, approves rations, and decides who earns new boots. And he knows everything. Whose sister is ill, who owes a debt. You can curry favor, but only with extreme caution. His sanctuary, what the staff call the counting room, is a small, square space, profoundly quieter than any other corner of this bustling manor. A lone, narrow window offers a sparse, dust-streaked beam of light, illuminating the broad desk perpetually covered in parchment. Nearby, you'd spot stacks of records, kept in place by smooth, heavy stones, a testament to their value. A locked cupboard houses sealed boxes, each with its own key, most of which he carries, jingling on a chain beneath his tunic. This is where the estate's receipts reside, not flimsy slips of paper, but substantial letters from tenants, lists from suppliers, and crucial tallies from the reeve. Every single coin entering or leaving the estate is accounted for, at least in theory. Of course, a clever steward, and most are, let's be honest, allows small losses here and there, enough to grease the wheels without ever betraying incompetence. While not entirely solitary, he confers with the bailiff, who handles plows and livestock, and the reeve, elected by villagers to manage laborers. He listens to their reports, files them away, but never truly trusts them. In his world, trust, you understand, is a dangerous luxury. Once a week, sometimes more often, you've just seen the meticulous, almost invisible threads that hold this whole world together, spun by the steward. Now, let's widen our gaze a little, shall we? You find yourself observing as this very steward, perhaps the man we just described, takes his customary seat across from the lord of the manor. This isn't just a casual chat. No, this is a delicate dance, a finely calibrated performance, where every word carries weight. The air in the lord's solar is heavy with the scent of old wood and the faintest hint of his expensive spiced wine, and the only sound for a moment is the crackle of the fire in the hearth. You can practically feel the unspoken tension, the need for perfect reassurance, without a single moment of boredom. Because, let's be honest, your lord isn't interested in the nitty-gritty details of rotten grain or the fluctuating price of tallow. What truly occupies the lord's thoughts? Simple, full coffers, quiet tenants, and a wine cellar brimming with the finest vintages. So, the steward, a master of brevity and precision, serves up a perfectly curated summary. He might mention, for instance, that the barley yield fell short by a couple of carts, but quickly adds that the ale stores remain robust enough to last through winter. Or perhaps, with a subtle nod, he'll inform you that Lady Eleanor's coveted cloth order from Coventry has finally arrived, though the purple dye, you notice, is a shade lighter than her ladyship had envisioned. And yes, a fence has collapsed in the southern fields, but repair is already underway. He delivers these tidings with the unflappable calm of a seasoned physician providing a diagnosis, measured and precise, even when the patient, metaphorically speaking, is teetering on the brink. There's a quiet, almost chilling power to this position, isn't there? The steward isn't one for booming orders, not like a knight might command his squires. He certainly doesn't issue threats, but what he can do with devastating effect is recommend. And a steward's recommendation, perhaps, that a certain servant is unreliable, or that a cook's assistant has shown a worrying carelessness with the precious flour, can end a career, or even a life's trajectory, overnight. This is why, when his tall, measured figure appears at the kitchen door, the raucous laughter suddenly dies. When he steps into the bustling great hall, you'd see every servant straighten their back, almost imperceptibly, as if an unseen hand has tugged at their spines. He isn't cruel, not overtly, nor is he particularly stern, but he is the one who puts it down in a world where most of your hard work simply dissipates into the thin, cold air. The person who holds the ledger, who keeps the written record, matters far more than you'd ever care to admit. His responsibilities stretch far beyond merely overseeing the food and wages. You see, he's the one who manages the collection of rents from the manor's numerous tenants, those hard-working peasants who toil on the Lord's land in exchange for coin or labor, or sometimes just the right to exist. He diligently records every late payment, every desperate plea for mercy, and every unfortunate instance of a family fleeing into the dark of night. Twice a year, under the shifting sun, you'd find him walking the extensive boundaries of the fields, a knotted rope in hand, muttering to himself about overgrown hedgerows and the subtle encroachments of neighbors. He meticulously inventories everything: the fragrant barrels of wine, the massive sacks of grain, the stacked cords of firewood, checking the heavy lock on the silver chest, inspecting the neat piles in the linen stores, and even auditing the buzzing beehives. He doesn't tend them himself, of course. He just ensures, with unwavering vigilance, that they are tended. Then comes the critical business of hiring a constant, revolving door in any large household. Every prospective new servant, from the scullery maid to the stable boy, must pass through his scrutiny. He pores over their origins, meticulously checks their references, and if they claim literacy, he demands to see their penmanship, scrutinizing every loop and line. He possesses a deep, almost instinctual wariness of charm. A clever young lad, with too much polish and an easy smile, might, in his experience, be a thief in the making. A girl too shy to utter a word might, conversely, be concealing a tempestuous temper. He makes meticulous notes, updates his ever-growing list, and keeps it close. And as any holy day or feast approaches, his mind, much like a complex clockwork mechanism, begins to whir, calculating costs with astonishing precision. How many esteemed guests, how many elaborate courses, how many precious candles will burn per hour, casting their flickering light? He'll review the cook's request for raisins, for instance, likely deeming it too generous, and trim it down with a firm stroke of his quill. He'll inquire why there are no plump pigeons listed on the menu, and when the falconer blames the unpredictable weather, the steward merely marks it down. He is never truly idle. Even when seated, ostensibly at rest, His mind relentlessly ticks. What's missing? What's been overspent? What vital detail hasn't yet been accounted for? And yet, despite this relentless meticulousness, you'd be wrong to call him heartless. Now and then, you might catch him looking the other way when a weary kitchen made pockets a small crust of pie, its sweet scent still lingering in the air. He might, on a sweltering summer's day, choose to ignore a stable boy's second mug of cool ale. These, however, are not random acts of kindness. Oh no, they are carefully calculated mercies. Push too hard, enforce too strict a rule, and the entire household could easily rebel. But be too lenient, let slackness creep in, and the very roof of this elaborate structure could cave in around you. At the year's inevitable end, he compiles the great roll, a vast parchment, intimidating in its sheer size, detailing every income, every outlay, all wages, every loss, every single debt. It is then presented to the Lord, sealed solemnly with wax, and often read aloud, a profound ritual of permanence, a testament to what was and what was spent. This, truly, is when the steward shines. For though his life is mostly lived in the quiet shadows, a world of numbers and hushed whispers, he is the living memory of the manor itself, the silent force that prevents its collapse. He is the one who knows precisely what the lady's ornate necklace cost, how many arrows lie gleaming in the armory's stores, and exactly when the gardener last trimmed the privy hedge. He might not wield a sword in battle, nor does he entertain guests with witty stories in the great hall. But he knows, for example, how much lamp oil was consumed last bitter winter. And that sort of intimate, meticulous knowledge, you see, can be a potent weapon all its own. At the close of each long day, you'd find him sitting alone, a single, modest cup of wine in his hand, as the flickering lamplight casts long shadows across the heavy ledger. He adds one more precise line, perhaps scratches a quick note to remind himself to count the geese in the morning light. Then he folds his hands, settles back, and simply thinks. Because tomorrow the hay must be tallied, the tallow weighed, and someone, you just know, must answer for that missing spool of linen, a trivial item perhaps, but he already knows who it was. He always knows. And now, step into the swirling, restless heart of the manor itself. It's humming, you hear it. Not with the joyful strains of music, though that will come later, surely. Not yet with the booming laughter or the delicate tinkling of silver goblets. No, this sound is older, far more urgent. It's the deep, resonant hum of ceaseless work. You can hear broom bristles scraping rhythmically across rough flagstones, heavy water pails clanking against the cold stone in distant corridors, the metallic rasp of knives being sharpened on whetstones. Voices, sharp and clear as bells, call out urgent orders. A festival day is rapidly approaching, and if you happen to be a servant in a wealthy medieval household, believe me, this isn't cause for joyous celebration. Oh no, it's a clear and definite cause for alarm, because feasts, in all their glittering glory, do not, under any circumstances, prepare themselves. They are not born spontaneously from joy. They are meticulously, painfully built from bone and broth and blisters. They are forged in sweat and sharp scolds and long, sleepless nights. These grand spectacles are the direct result of the relentless labor of every member of the household. The frantic kitchen staff, the hard-working scullery maids, the ever-vigilant stewards, the scurrying pages, the busy stable hands, and even that poor, trembling boy tasked with polishing every single pewter dish before dusk descends. And for all this exhausting, back-breaking labor, not a single bite of the succulent roasted goose will ever pass your lips. Not unless, of course, you manage to steal it. And even then, you'd best be quick about it, wouldn't you? Let's begin, as is always the case in this world, at dawn. The air is still damp and cool, thick with the smell of wood smoke already rising from the kitchen chimneys. Our steward, naturally, has been awake and working for at least 2 hours already, meticulously tallying the morning's stock. Down in the sweltering, cavernous kitchen, the cook paces frantically in his worn slippers, muttering dire threats of violence to anyone who dares misplace even a single sprig of precious rosemary. The very atmosphere here is a heady concoction of smoke, pungent herbs, sharp onions, and the faint, unmistakable scent of panic emanating from some undercooked pastry. Today, you see, the noble family hosts a grand feast, perhaps in honor of St. Martin's Day, or it might be the Lord's birthday, or maybe simply the arrival of some distant cousin from London. The precise reason, quite frankly, doesn't matter much. The excuses change, but the colossal effort required, that you can be sure, remains absolutely constant. The menu, as you might expect, is extraordinarily ambitious. Of course it is. There will be 4 elaborate courses, each brimming with multiple opulent dishes, perfectly roasted meats, richly spiced stews, freshly baked bread, still warm from the oven, savory pies, delicate sugared fruits, and perhaps, if the day is truly special, even the magnificent peacock itself, presented in all its feathered glory. You can almost taste the acrid bite of wood smoke and hear the frantic sizzle from the kitchen, a stark contrast to the quiet morning outside. Here, in the heart of the chaos, a culinary miracle is unfolding. A magnificent swan, once stripped and roasted to perfection, now stands redressed in its own pristine feathers, its polished golden beak angled just so, an almost comical expression of eternal judgment on its face. The spit boys, their faces streaked with ash and sweat, have been at it since before dawn, their arms aching. One grunts as he rotates a succulent leg of mutton, its fat crackling, while another struggles with a plump game hen that persistently slips on its rod, threatening to tumble into the roaring inferno below. The fire, a hungry beast of its own, devours logs with a fierce, spitting intensity, painting the back wall of the room a permanent charcoal. Smoke, thick and biting, stings your eyes and throat, clinging to every surface, every